The basketball world just witnessed its most explosive, unauthorized footage in recent memory. A supposedly secure broadcast segment, strictly intended to remain hidden, mysteriously found its way onto the internet. Total chaos erupted almost instantaneously. The star point guard falsely assumed his digital broadcast had fully concluded. Suddenly, he began speaking without filters, assuming complete privacy. However, his subsequent dramatic revelations left the entire professional basketball community utterly breathless. He questioned if the feed had died, venting deep exhaustion over continually concealing his legendary teammates' supposedly dark nature. The athlete actually uttered those exact sentiments. Surprisingly enough, that specific statement paled in comparison to the absolute madness unleashed when the complete video surfaced. Spectators watched the guard dismantle every hidden secret from that highly stressful second championship pursuit alongside his superstar captain in Ohio. Ruthless authority struggles, intense executive conflicts, toxic internal politics, and that supposedly unbreakable fraternal bond. Every single detail the public believed regarding their dynamic was ultimately revealed as a massive, carefully constructed facade. The instant that unauthorized footage struck cyberspace, the professional basketball universe descended into absolute, unprecedented chaos. Audiences overwhelmed social platforms with pure astonishment, witnessing historical narratives shift instantly. However, dedicated observers tracking the Cleveland franchise during 2017 felt a strange sense of familiarity. Tremendous underlying friction always existed, merely hovering on the absolute verge of an inevitable detonation, particularly following the guard's mid-summer departure request, boldly abandoning the sport's most magnificent and highly publicized platform. 8 years later, the star confirmed long-held public suspicions. Existing beneath his captain's immense shadow involved strict domination rather than any genuine friendship. This dramatic revelation sparked massive investigations. Enthusiasts began unearthing ancient footage and long-forgotten media sessions. Instances where the guard appeared visibly annoyed during media conferences or notably silent courtside were suddenly recontextualized. Those subtle emotional displays now carried profound meaning. They served as glaring warnings. The narrative established that challenging conditions spared absolutely no participant from intense scrutiny that fateful evening. Observers remembered a reporter calling the veteran a paternal guardian, a suggestion the star instantly and fiercely dismantled. Viewed through a modern lens, that specific interaction carried immense weight. The star conveyed utter disbelief at being asked if his older teammate functioned as his parent. He found the inquiry completely absurd and disrespectful, noting their minimal age gap. Consequently, eager spectators began obsessively analyzing every single physical interaction and post-game greeting. Each subtle smile and courtside glare suddenly transformed into crucial fragments of a massive, previously overlooked psychological mystery. Following that massive social media frenzy, an undeniable truth emerged. The dynamic point guard never functioned merely as a secondary supporting character. He operated as an absolute powerhouse, achieving greatness completely independently, way before the infamous locker room controversies even materialized. Observers must remember how certain loyalists constantly pretend the guard contributed nothing significant during that ultimate championship series. However, witnesses of the decisive 2016 matchup understand reality. The fearless scorer sank the defining tournament basket. That remarkably clutch perimeter attempt dismantled the Golden State dynasty, effectively securing his captain's third title. Absent that legendary play, historical sports conversations would shift drastically. The narrative must acknowledge that the spectacular ball handler operated at the exact same elite tier as his legendary counterpart throughout that historic postseason campaign. The sharpshooter essentially rescued the franchise while his supposedly fearless leader retreated to the perimeter, cowardly delegating the most critical final moments entirely to his younger teammate. He basically demanded the guard finish the job. Yet, fully comprehending this boiling animosity requires traveling back to 2011, when the phenomenal rookie initially graced the Ohio courts. Long before the fanfare and unexpected roster changes, preceding the infamous homecoming, the spectacular guard reigned as the metropolis's ultimate prodigy, draining phenomenal buzzer-beating shots amidst screaming commentators. The brilliant playmaker controlled the tempo flawlessly. Supporters adored his presence, peers admired his work ethic, and his extraordinarily courageous aura naturally established him as the organization's absolute cornerstone. He completely ignored superficial fame and artificially constructed powerhouse rosters. He avoided manipulating media storylines or engaging in shadowy organizational warfare, openly declaring that modern artificial stardom was decaying. He argued that society's perception of glory is a completely manufactured lie, pointing out how countless individuals live entirely theatrical lives, constantly performing instead of being genuine. They possessed zero authenticity. He played the game with raw talent, unyielding dedication, and fierce enthusiasm, completely ignoring all surrounding theatrical chaos. His top June 2011 Ohio draft selection triggered absolute pandemonium among all incredibly loyal supporters. The desolate metropolis rediscovered its optimism, as the spectacular point guard provided genuine inspiration. He entered the professional ranks following a brief yet incredibly dazzling collegiate tenure. During his opening professional performance, he proved entirely prepared to completely conquer the massive athletic stage. His inaugural campaign yielded 18.5 points, 5.4 assists, and 3.7 rebounds, shooting nearly 47% overall and 40% outside. These absolutely shattered expectations. They represented guaranteed future legendary status, consequently capturing the 2012 Top Newcomer Award by securing 117 of 121 primary ballots shocked absolutely nobody. That merely began his ascent. Through 2012, 2013, and 2014, the brilliant guard continuously elevated his spectacular offensive arsenal, dropping 22.5 points initially, then 20.8. He constantly evolved, consistently dominating publications through mesmerizing offensive mastery. Approaching 2014, absolutely no spectator considered him an inexperienced newcomer. During that mid-season exhibition, he absolutely exploded for 31 points alongside 14 assists, effortlessly securing the most valuable player hardware as if running simple practice drills. However, his defining characteristic extended far beyond exceptional dribbling maneuvers. His unparalleled mentality proved defining. He completely avoided manufacturing toxic controversies, intentionally sparking internal chaos, or desperately seeking external public validation. The young athlete simply grinded. Whispers from his prep days straight through his professional debut illustrated an identical narrative. A humble, laser-focused competitor craving the leather sphere, avoiding cameras. His father cemented this philosophy early, assuring the boy he possessed a luxury machine's motor. Without his drive, the entire squad would stall. That profound wisdom remained etched inside him forever, a relentless attitude the point guard brought straight into the professional arena. Sweat silently, avoid the circus, and allow the talent to scream. This virtuoso trusted entirely in keeping his vision lowered and permitting his tireless labor to command absolute respect. To the organization, this phenom represented far more than another backcourt body. He served as the ultimate savior, the bedrock upon which the empire was being constructed. For a fleeting era, he perfectly embodied that monumental destiny. A youthful, sovereign-ruling Ohio, completely pristine and fiercely unstoppable. Long before the deafening chaos, prior to the prodigal son's comeback, and preceding the poisonous press, the dazzling guard was already glowing fiercely, engraving his legacy across the association night after night without ever hunting empty popularity. That grounded purity transformed the mesmerizing ball handler into the absolute ideal protagonist for Ohio. The maestro required zero glamorous front pages, artificial alliances, or journalistic pawns to artificially elevate his status. The man purely desired to display his artistry on the hardwood in its rawest form. A prodigy armed with supernatural dribbling wizardry, a lethal shooting stroke, and abundant courage to force a fractured populace to finally dream once more. Heading into 2014, the sensational talent had served his sentence, sacrificed immensely, and rightfully claimed his royal status. The novice tag had completely evaporated. The warrior had morphed into an elite luminary, the ultimate organizational pillar, and for one brilliant flash in time, the absolute pulse of the city's sporting culture. Yet the exact second he held the region mesmerized, precisely as stability settled and his legend silently expanded, reality violently inverted entirely in the dark. 2014 violently shattered the peace when the reigning superstar abruptly declared his grand return to his native soil. 4 seasons after abandoning the territory to construct overpowered rosters and hunt ultimate glory, the juggernaut reappeared unannounced. Zero direct conversations, absolute silence toward the reigning point guard, just empty air. In one breath, the squad belonged entirely to the dazzling guard. In the very next heartbeat, the arena transformed into the returning veteran's personal sandbox. The very instant that legendary homecoming declaration detonated across the globe, the entire organizational cosmos spiraled out of control. Furthermore, the most insane detail remained hidden. The reigning savior discovered the monumental shift exactly like everyday civilians, casually swiping down his mobile screen. Envision that level of disrespect. A marquee athlete anchoring a massive institution realizes his entire destiny has shattered via a random social media post. The blindsided star admitted he possessed absolutely zero prior knowledge. He later confessed to discovering the king's grand return identically to the general public, completely lacking any preliminary warning or mental preparation. Partnering alongside the legendary forward was never remotely scribbled into his career master plan or anticipated as an inevitable reality. The blindsided maestro swore he remained completely uninformed. The fortress he had painstakingly assembled stone by stone evaporated, abruptly demoting him from the ultimate attraction. The sovereign was instantly reduced to a henchman. Executive leadership immediately bowed to fulfill the returning titan's whims. Tacticians frantically altered strategies for him, while journalists ruthlessly inverted their narratives before dawn. Every lens violently locked onto the monarch. His public relations mercenaries, corporate marketers, and press associates completely inundated the franchise's corridors. Competing alongside such a colossal icon guaranteed a massive avalanche of journalistic scrutiny and an endless, exhausting tug-of-war involving conflicting public perceptions. The locker room inevitably morphed into a chaotic hurricane of heavily twisted fabrications, bringing an immense wave of toxic backstage diplomacy. Instantaneously, the local franchise ceased operating as a traditional athletic unit, degrading into a glorified theatrical platform dedicated solely to one individual's historical expedition. As blinding illumination tracked the monarch endlessly, the displaced prodigy continued producing magic. He maintained his premium caliber, razor-sharp concentration, and unbreakable discipline. Yet the surrounding environment had permanently fractured. The prodigal son delivered significantly more than just his generational athletic prowess upon his return. The legendary forward dragged a completely foreign, shadowy universe alongside him. An elite entertainment syndicate, a galaxy of celebrities, and heavily restricted underground soirees requiring strict non-disclosure agreements merely for entry had arrived. It birthed an unprecedented breed of pandemonium. Overnight, notorious music moguls like Diddy and heavyweight entertainment executives mysteriously infected the once pure Midwestern athletic climate. Their presence had zero connection to sports, rooted strictly in leveraging networks and asserting power. The squad's internal aura rapidly decayed. Brotherhood vanished, replaced entirely by cold corporate transactions. The displaced guard sensed the rot immediately as the atmosphere plummeted into a grim, artificial, and suffocating gloom. Survival now depended purely on manufactured visuals and deceptive public relations. Authenticity died. Terrifyingly, the young phenom's intuition proved flawlessly accurate when internet sleuths eventually began investigating. Buried photographs violently re-emerged. Clandestine footage leaked, displaying the team's monarch attending those exact same unhinged gatherings orchestrated by Diddy. That exact discovery forced terrified onlookers to connect the fragments. This was the identical music baron currently locked behind steel bars facing catastrophic charges, the very man captured on chilling surveillance tapes executing monstrous acts of violence against Cassie Ventura. The exact individual 50 Cent recently obliterated in a documentary, allegedly tying the embattled mogul to those legendary 90s assassinations involving Tupac and Biggie. Interviewers famously pressed witnesses regarding the exact mastermind behind that infamous drive-by assassination targeting Tupac Shakur. Former associates testified that Sean likely orchestrated the grim demise of those two beloved rap icons, citing newfound mature clarity. This represented the terrifyingly dark inner sanctum the monarch fiercely maintained. Spectators recoiled in horror, finally understanding why the displaced guard always appeared profoundly disturbed by that sinister entourage. He never acted maliciously. The athlete fiercely guarded his sanity. Long before the masses caught on, Irving sensed the toxic atmosphere. The gifted guard possessed neither weakness nor envy. Instead, he found himself trapped within a superficial, theatrical, and ruthlessly ambitious regime. That pivotal moment forever altered his entire trajectory. Front office decisions, press narratives, and private team chatter solely orbited James's massive gravitational pull. For an athlete whose entire legacy rested upon genuine self-expression, the atmosphere grew incredibly stifling. The point guard never cared about surrendering the spotlight. The true terror lay in surrendering his soul. The guard operated purely on spiritual vibrations, something true purists understand. Once those pure vibrations became tainted, stepping away remained his solitary option. The king's relentless craving for absolute dominion transcended the hardwood entirely. The legend demanded total authority over press narratives, guarded his brand and handpicked teammates, while dictating executive decisions as if holding dual roles. Oh, the sweet irony. Years prior, the superstar justified abandoning his hometown by condemning management's utter incompetence. However, upon his grand return, he completely castrated the executives, since the entire franchise blindly bowed to him. Securing championships was never the sole motivation behind his homecoming. He returned for absolute dictatorship. Previously, he operated as a lone wolf in Ohio, constantly lamenting a lack of elite assistance and complaining about missing the legendary sidekicks that history's greatest champions enjoyed. In reality, whenever adversity struck, the forward actively sought out the path of least resistance. Fleeing his origins, he aligned with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh down in Florida, transforming that formidable trio into an impenetrable, guaranteed insurance policy. Yet, the instant he noticed his former franchise draft an explosive, fearless phenom overflowing with natural talent, the prodigal son rushed back home immediately. This gesture represented far more than mere loyalty. It functioned as a hostile takeover. His brief deals featuring opt-out clauses defied standard league negotiations. These agreements acted as pure leverage, serving as absolute shackles that kept Ohio's management operating in perpetual terror. Annually, every single transaction required his explicit blessing, or heads would roll. The ensuing consequences materialized overnight. The lineup transformed completely in the blink of an eye. Like predictable clockwork, ancient allies suddenly began surfacing. J.R. Smith, Iman Shumpert, Mike Miller, James Jones, and Kendrick Perkins, every loyal crony, smoothly assumed their designated positions as though a grandmaster were setting his personal pieces. On August 23, 2014, the massive blockbuster trade finalized the hostile takeover. That was the undeniable flair. That energetic, youthful roster vanished. The organization had completely transformed into a personalized monarchy. Every single detail now catered strictly to his specific schemes, personal desires, and aging timeline. Not even the sideline leaders possessed job security. During January 2016, despite boasting 30 wins and 11 losses, management abruptly terminated their top tactician without warning. The replacement naturally became Tyronn Lue, the exact assistant the superstar had notoriously championed. The manipulation hardly ended there. This identical blueprint trailed the legend across state lines. Moving out west yielded identical results. He directly orchestrated the massive blockbuster deal for a dominant big man, aggressively campaigned to acquire an erratic former MVP, and brazenly pulled strings so the organization drafted his own son. Across franchises, the formula never wavered. The monarch dictates, and the peasants blindly adapt. Such rigid compliance violently clashed with the younger guard's inner fire. His soul craved liberation, shunning authoritarianism, prioritizing artistic flair over strict institutional obedience. The maestro refused to exist as a mere puppet, especially beneath an overlord who constantly altered storylines mid-performance. Teaming up alongside a transcendent icon, or any comparable historical figure that critics constantly measure against, presents an entirely unique, ferocious beast for a young player to conquer. The entire expedition morphs into an unprecedented psychological trial, completely alien to standard competition. An unspoken mandate instantly demands absolute perfection, requiring players to dominate every metric and secure the ultimate crown immediately. Outwardly, the partnership appeared flawless. The legendary pair constantly flashed bright grins for the swarming cameras, sharing elaborate handshakes and hoisting championship trophies. Yet, beneath the dazzling spectacle and viral clips, massive, irreparable fractures silently deepened. That shocking 2017 trade demand wasn't some spontaneous outburst. It represented the explosive detonation of endlessly repressed anguish. The talented playmaker had navigated an emotional minefield for ages, feigning happiness inside a claustrophobic chamber governed entirely by supreme arrogance and iron-fisted authority. Behind closed doors, the veteran wasn't just a peer. He embodied the entire ecosystem. Onlookers eventually confessed witnessing the severe condescension, noting how the leader constantly adopted a patronizing, fatherly voice, barking commands as if instructing a clueless amateur rather than respecting an elite peer. One notorious clip immortalized everything. The elder statesman towered over him, delivering a stern lecture while the guard stared forward with dead eyes. That silent interaction screamed absolute volumes. Meanwhile, broadcasts relentlessly transitioned back to the anchors, seamlessly shifting focus to the second match of the evening out in California. Whenever the electric guard graced the hardwood, the heavy atmosphere weighed on him. A distinct, hidden boundary dictated the hierarchy. The monarch supreme, everyone else secondary. That overwhelming aura felt incredibly unbearable. The sheer weight of that massive ego permeated the very oxygen, swallowing all available space. True equality never existed. It remained a total dictatorship. Soon, that bitter friction bled into public press conferences. The dominant forward manipulated far more than offensive schemes. He orchestrated masterful psychological warfare behind the scenes. All those mysterious internet messages and quiet press remarks were absolutely calculated. Hearing demands for new playmakers or calls for teammates to mature felt like weaponized critiques disguised as captaincy, which the elite point guard deeply resented. Such indirect hostility and media-driven puppetry represented the ultimate form of professional degradation. The ultimate insult arrived when the franchise icon condescendingly referred to him as a child during a broadcast, claiming he merely wanted to elevate the youngster's game. The narrative was spun that the older veteran was simply doing everything possible to nurture a youth into basketball greatness. But the brilliant playmaker had reached his breaking point. He was no fragile prospect begging for mentorship, but rather a title holder, a perennial standout, and an elite backcourt phenomenon. Therefore, the explosive departure whispers in 2017 felt perfectly logical. His choice represented a desperate flight for survival rather than outright treason. He would later describe his departure not as a mere exit, but as a grand escape. Behind closed doors, management had quietly negotiated shipping him off for another superstar forward, keeping their elite guard entirely out of the loop. The organization bowed to their primary kingpin, entirely willing to sacrifice their second-best talent as a mere chess piece. This reality gave heavy weight to his later claims. Those words carried immense gravity. His motivation was never cowardly flight, but rather a necessary liberation from an intensely poisonous organizational culture. He survived in an environment that worshipped his on-court magic while completely silencing his personal agency. Discovering the clandestine plotting to exile him instantly pulverized whatever fragile faith the Star Guard still possessed. As the scandalous revelation flooded the news cycle, the team's leading man predictably sprang into action. The veteran icon launched a fierce public relations defense, aggressively pleading total ignorance regarding the secret negotiations. He desperately attempted to preserve his shining reputation, though a highly skeptical audience refused to swallow the act. Prominent television analysts fiercely attacked the charade, boldly asserting that the superstar was completely aware and entirely focused on safeguarding his pristine legacy instead of speaking truthfully. Observers pointed out that this exact brand of manufactured innocence was the most infuriating aspect of the veteran superstar's reign. The narrative was carefully sterilized months afterward, painting the team's leader as a blameless victim who had consistently begged his brilliant sidekick to stay for the long haul. The young guard recognized the brutal truth with blinding clarity. The undeniable evidence confirmed he remained an unappreciated asset within that selfish hierarchy. Deemed a convenient tool rather than a revered equal, the spectacular finisher executed the singular logical countermeasure. He completely evaporated from their radar. Sparing no courtesy messages or farewell telephone conversations, the alienated star severed all communication and formally demanded a permanent relocation. Frankly, passing judgment on his cold departure proved impossible. The franchise had already attempted to blindside him on 2 separate occasions. When reporters pressed the alienated star about whether he had consulted his famous co-star before delivering an ultimatum to ownership, the tension peaked. He confirmed his absolute silence, prompting confused media members to question his unapologetic reasoning. He bluntly challenged why such a courtesy was required. Observers viewed the move as vindictive, yet for the isolated guard, it represented absolute self-preservation. Continuing dialogue with a figure who controlled media storylines, dictated sideline leadership, and transformed genuine crises into personal branding opportunities felt utterly pointless. The disgruntled champion sought ultimate tranquility, mental sharpness, and a genuine opportunity to exist beyond the shadow of an overpowering corporate athlete. His eventual departure severed ties with far more than a basketball roster. He abandoned a suffocating ecosystem fundamentally constructed upon vanity, absolute dominance, and hidden agendas. This environment had always denied him true parity. The sport itself became secondary to the desperate struggle to reclaim his own psychological sovereignty. Remaining within those toxic walls guaranteed the slow, agonizing erosion of his personal character. The electric scorer refused to sacrifice his inner spirit to satisfy another man's championship blueprint. The instant he vanished, a catastrophic reckoning slammed into the Ohio organization. Management immediately recognized the magnitude of their blunder. The supposedly invincible Eastern Conference juggernaut began to crumble. Internal fractures had existed for months, and the departed point guard was the unseen adhesive keeping the fragile structure whole. His exit immediately transformed those microscopic fissures into apocalyptic seismic events. On August 22, 2017, the front office shipped their alienated phenom to a northern rival in exchange for an ailing floor general, 2 supporting players, and a coveted 2018 draft selection. While the transaction appeared mathematically sound, the actual execution was an unmitigated catastrophe. Their newly acquired veteran arrived with a severely broken body. The incoming wing player floundered helplessly. Locker room harmony evaporated instantly, leaving the entire roster looking sluggish, disjointed, and perpetually trapped in thick mud. This catastrophic fallout illuminated a hidden reality. The departed phenom functioned as far more than a secondary attraction. He was the vital balancing force. While he was present, the organization boasted an elite offensive machinery, possessing a stellar 110.9 efficiency mark. The machine hummed flawlessly. Following his devastating exit, their defensive intensity plummeted to 29th place. Such dreadful metrics represented utter humiliation for a roster that had just competed on the ultimate championship stage. Their overall performance metric nosedived from a robust positive 3.2 down to sheer mediocrity. Crucially, this collapse occurred without any visible decline from their leading icon. The veteran superstar continued producing mythological statistics, yet his supporting infrastructure completely disintegrated. Symmetrical play, interpersonal harmony, and mutual reliance vanished entirely. The once feared juggernaut morphed into a desperate, agonizingly fragile group, clawing their way through grueling playoff rounds and relying on sheer luck to advance. A fierce Midwestern squad dragged them into a 7-game dogfight, followed by another agonizing 7-game battle against a depleted Eastern rival missing their top 2 weapons. Every possession appeared horribly unnatural and mechanically stiff, as if the very soul of the franchise had been violently extracted. The ultimate disaster of choosing dictatorship over organic synergy unfolded as James's obsessive micromanagement ultimately sabotaged the entire operation. The instant Irving escaped that stifling regime, the foundation crumbled. A poisonous atmosphere infected the locker room while Isaiah Thomas viciously targeted his own squad. Jay Crowder wandered the hardwood like a ghost, leaving an unfortunate Kevin Love to absorb the brutal blame for every failure. Cleveland predictably decimated half of their roster right at the trade deadline, executing a desperate panic maneuver completely foreign to genuine championship organizations. Such devastation is guaranteed when an organization exiles the lone force capable of anchoring their madness, and those violent shockwaves permanently altered the Eastern Conference. The Celtics immediately seized power, transforming into immediate threats as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown aggressively spearheaded a terrifying new generation. Toronto violently shattered their ceiling to capture the 2019 crown. Milwaukee awakened into a juggernaut, and Philadelphia heavily armed their ranks. A dormant conference roared back to life, permanently shattering Cleveland's tyrannical grip as the basketball world ruthlessly left them in the dust. That monumental superstar fracture completely rewired the association's DNA, culminating in the ultimate betrayal on July 1, 2018, when James repeated his classic escape. He abandoned ship for Los Angeles in pursuit of fresh Hollywood glory, leaving behind a Cleveland squad that experienced far worse than a standard decline. The franchise plunged headfirst into the absolute darkest, most pathetic depths of the professional standings. Devoid of purpose, culture, or energy, the organization deteriorated into vacant arenas and surrendered matches, entirely stripped of any lingering championship pedigree. That legendary James-focused machine secretly relied entirely on Irving's ability to anchor the turbulence. Absent his presence, the entire setup revealed itself as pure illusion. The Chosen One departed yet another time, though on this occasion, the battered city suffered a tragedy far deeper than merely misplacing a singular talent. They forfeited the one vital pillar preventing absolute self-destruction, sending the 2 former allies rocketing toward drastically opposing destinies from that exact second onward. One man hunted for fresh markets and theatrical legacies, while the other heroically fought to resurrect his personal identity, spiritual vigor, and ultimate autonomy. James fully surrendered to the cinematic lifestyle, prioritizing flashing bulbs, rolling film, and the relentless construction of a corporate monarchy. Between silver screen features, cinematic bios, and Los Angeles glitter, the king morphed into a commercial conglomerate, whereas his former point guard rebelled against that exact philosophy. Irving aggressively pursued sovereignty over superficial fame, forcefully seizing the reins of his professional journey to sketch out a radically personal definition of victory. Meanwhile, an endless battlefield raged among the spectators, with James' loyalists aggressively maintaining that the rebellious guard single-handedly annihilated a dynasty. However, Irving's fiercely devoted disciples loudly returned fire continuously, boldly broadcasting how that specific playmaker single-handedly rescued the king's entire historical standing. Truthfully, without that ruthlessly precise perimeter dagger during Game 7 of 2016, the Monarchs' championship resume would sit at 3-7, not 4-6. Reality remains undisputed. The polarizing guard completely ignored the massive public backlash, anchoring himself in fierce authenticity until absolute triumph finally materialized. Despite navigating through turbulent chapters across Boston and Brooklyn before landing in Dallas, the maestro meticulously reconstructed his fractured reputation brick by agonizing brick. Arriving at 2024, he evolved past mere existence into pure dominance, punishing adversaries for Dallas with 24.7 points, 4.8 boards, and 4.6 assists nightly, shooting nearly 40% from deep. He executed this magnificent statistical slaughter well into his 30s with terrifying, razor-sharp precision. His shooting stroke remained venomous, his dribbling wizardry unequaled, and his late-game heroics absolutely mythical, yet mathematics merely whispered half the actual legend. The ultimate, hard-fought conquest materialized in the form of absolute reverence. Professional peers entirely abandoned the sidekick narrative, choosing instead to elevate him as a visionary artisan, possessing unparalleled elite mastery over the hardwood. Fresh generations obsessively analyzed his dancing feet, his lethal intermediate spacing, and his hypnotic speed alterations, transforming the veteran from a simple competitor into an elite professor. The Texas franchise welcomed his spirit unconditionally, with the coaching staff officially crowning him the undisputed emotional engine driving their locker room. This profound honor stemmed not from mere offensive fireworks, but from the immense cultural standard he violently enforced upon the squad. Injecting militant rigor into training sessions and icy composure during battles, his unwavering psychological armor shielded the roster perfectly whenever devastating health casualties threatened to sink their season. The Mavericks recognized the ultra-rare gem glittering in their possession and brutally refused to let such brilliance escape their absolute grasp. Shockwaves rippled when the magician declined his existing clause, opting instead for a fresh 3-year pact hovering near $119 million, a transaction built entirely on profound trust. This mutual commitment proved absolute devotion, uniting an organization that believed in the misunderstood genius with a player who finally found executives valuing his soul over scandalous media narratives. A supportive sanctuary valuing grueling dedication over sensationalized theatricality remained the sole treasure he had been hunting for since day one. Tragedy violently struck in March 2025 as a catastrophic anterior cruciate ligament rupture instantly assassinated his campaign and paralyzed a genuinely cinematic resurrection. While undeniably a devastating strike to his momentum, the horrific setback somehow magnified his glorious achievements rather than deleting his hard-earned progress. The global audience finally recognized the gladiator he morphed into, a commanding general who ruthlessly bled to conquer his own mythology against the grain. Zooming out to absorb the complete masterpiece reveals a profoundly human saga that drastically transcends the simple bouncing of a rubber sphere. It stands tall as an epic, unforgettable chronicle of absolute defiant resurrection. Chronicling a rebel who abandoned a poisoned empire, meticulously resurrected his honor from ashes, commanded total reverence from fellow gladiators, and proved that authentic supremacy requires zero artificial illumination. True majesty demands unbreakable resolve. Leaving the ultimate question hanging, did the controversial maestro cement his rightful glory, or does this saga secretly harbor another shocking chapter? The storyteller invites the audience to ignite the debate below, smash the approval icon, distribute this epic tale to genuine hardwood purists, and lock in their subscription for future dramatic deep dives. their paths would surely cross again.